So time has come for me to offer an evening reflection. You probably noticed that we've been rotating through various forms of morning reflections, Q&As, evening reflections. And I'm going to enter a plea of diminished capacity. Dim cap, I think they call it in legal terms, because evening isn't my strongest time of day. I tend to be a little bit more awake and alert and coherent in the morning and in the day at daytime. So, yes, that's my plea bargain. Anyway, as I was meditating, bits and pieces of what I might talk about were popping up or floating through. Just before the bell rang, Ruth Denison sprang to mind. Some of you, probably many of you, know who she is or who she was. She passed away a number of years ago. Some of you may not know, may not be familiar with her. People who are more newcomers to the path. But she was a very well-respected, accomplished lay practitioner, a teacher, taught at the Dhamma Center that she founded in the desert, southwest desert, Joshua Tree, and named Dhammadina was her retreat center. Anyway, she was a very well-respected teacher, German origin, had a very interesting life, has a very interesting biography, but had quite a following of devoted students for many years that she taught. And she was always quite supportive of the monastic community too, even though she didn't pursue a monastic lifestyle. She had a great appreciation for the communities, particularly the communities of Ajahn Chah in the West, Ajahn Sumedho. She came up to Abhayagiri several times at least in our earlier days when she was still traveling around, and her ashes, actually, some of her ashes are ensconced underneath an oak tree on our property, along with her also deceased husband, Henry Denison. And as she was close to her passing away, I'm not sure, I can't remember, 7, 8 years ago, maybe longer. She was in the last few months, I guess, last couple. Was that 12 years ago? Dim cap. The memory is fading. The years are relentlessly passing. Anyway, as she was passing, or getting close to passing away, a small group of people from Abhayagiri went down there. Not me, unfortunately, but Lumpur Pasano, I think it was Tan Kantiko, went along, Debbie. I can't remember if there was somebody else or not. That was it, the three of them. And anyway, she, was starting to lose some of her mental capacities, as well as physically really winding down, not able to care for herself so much. When they went to visit her, and they did chanting and spent some time and visited. But the one comment that, when they were talking about it afterwards, that they came back with, that really has stayed with me, struck, was the fact that, kind of close to her death, she and in their conversation, she became quite alert at one point in the conversation, kind of pulled her cognitive capacity together, and basically gave them a kind of a mild admonishment, if you will, in if you know Ruth, in only the way that Ruth could. But it was basically to not settle for just plain happiness, that we all have the capacity to do much more than just settle for happiness. Basically, go the full path, take it to its completion. And apparently the strength of her comment, her instruction, her admonishment was quite powerful, coming from somebody who was about to pass away, and with her history. So I thought maybe just to mention a little bit about why are we doing all this anyway? Why are we sitting here and coming through, trials and tribulations and difficult mind states, or maybe not if it's been a more easeful retreat. But just to remind ourselves of the potential of this practice that we've taken on, and not to settle just for a bit of lessening of our stress or psychological well-being, kind of leading a little bit more of a aware, less obstructed life, and not just settling for a bit more happiness. Although these are all, of course, parts of the practice in terms of realizing the little bits and pieces of relief from dukkha that we can, even on the very first day of practicing as a Buddhist or doing some meditation. So it's not to diminish those aspects, those results, but to keep in context. The Buddha was teaching a full path to liberation, and not to dismiss that, not to sidestep that, and to start to get a sense, if you haven't already, of the fullness of the path and the potential that we all have to realize a complete end of suffering. So don't sell yourselves short or think that it's not reachable. There's steps along the way, of course, and it's a gradual path for 99.99% of us, I would say, except for possibly a few people in the world these days who come in on the cusp, ready to complete their work in this lifetime. But for most of us, it's a long, gradual path. But one that is worth every ounce of effort that we can put into it, because the results are incomparable if we take it to its full completion. There was a question at the Q&A today or yesterday, recently, I think it was today, about somebody was asking a question about Silabhata Paramasa, the fetter of attachment to rules and conventions, or rites and rituals, rules and conventions, precepts and practices, different ways that it's used and translated. And Ajahn Sudhiro gave a very comprehensive, good description of what that meant. And I thought maybe I'd just kind of explore a little bit about where that comes from in the teachings. He mentioned it as one of the first three fetters, and I thought I'd mention briefly just tonight a little bit about some of the aspects of what we mean by the fetters. The 10 fetters, as they're often called, Sangyojana. And they are the fetters or obstructions that keep us bound up in samsara, the relentless cycle of rebirth and death that we've been bound up in since essentially beginningless time, since an undiscoverable beginning, and have the potential to stay in it for the indefinable future unless we take the opportunity to consider how to free ourselves from the cycles of suffering that we keep on getting bound up in, whether it's continuing thinking about it just in this lifetime or thinking about it over eons of lifetimes. But these 10 fetters are basically a description of it's a set of obstructions that's talked about. There's many ways that the Buddha talks about our obstructions in practice, and the 5 hindrances, the anusaya, those underlying tendencies that we referred to, as well as other lists of various combinations of difficulties, obstructions of practice, fetters, and these 10 fetters being one of them in terms of what keeps us bound in this cycle. And I'll just run through the 10 of them briefly in case people aren't familiar with them, but maybe speak to just a few of them. The 10 fetters being maybe not necessarily in this order, but Sakkaya Ditthi, or the personality view, identity view of the manifestation of that belief or sense of I am something. Vicikicca, doubt. Silabhata Paramasa, the one that was asked about in the question, attachment to rites and rituals, rules and conventions. And then 4 and 5 being kamachanda, sensual desire, and vyapada, ill will, sensual desire and ill will as fetters. And then rupa raga and arupa raga, which is basically the moving into more less sensually oriented fetters, and more fetters related to the desire for becoming, the desire for being, the desire for existence. Whether it's in the form realm or the formless realm. Rupa raga, arupa raga. And then the last 3 of being mana, which is the more subtle form of self-view, conceit I am, mana, and uddhacca, restlessness, a very subtle form of the hindrance, uddhacca kukucca, restlessness and worry, agitation, but more of a subtle form of restlessness in the mind. And the very final fetter that's overcome, avijja, ignorance of the 4 Noble Truths. So they say, the Buddha taught that the first 3, eliminating them, is when we enter with surety the path of Dhamma, the stream of Dhamma. And then the diminution of sensuality, or sensual desire and ill will, results in the status, if you will, or the description of being a once returner, due to come back to this world just one more time. And then the complete elimination of those 2, of sensuality, sensual desire, and ill will, being what's called a non-returner, meaning not to return to any kind of material realm, form realm, but a rebirth into a very pure existence, the pure abodes, and then enlightenment is from that stage of existence. And then the final 5 fetters, elimination of those, resulting in arahantship, complete liberation. So roughly, that's the rough template of the 10 fetters and the elimination of them, and the results. For those of you who are interested, you further study on your own on that. But just to talk about the first 3, of which that Silabhata Paramasa talked about earlier was all about. And the first 3 are so important. It was a talk that I listened to not that long ago, a recording of Ajahn Sumedho that really struck me, because he spends a lot of time, actually, or has spent a lot of time in his years teaching, really emphasizing the possibility, the potential of all of us eliminating those first three fetters and becoming firmly established in the path, unshakably established in the path. And trying to instill in all of us the real potential that we have for that kind of understanding. And in this one particular talk that really caught my attention, he referred to the first three fetters as an artificial conditioning, as opposed to the last seven fetters being more, in his words, natural to the human condition. And I really had to think about that quite a bit, had to contemplate that quite a bit, because he didn't really go into a huge amount of detail about what he meant by artificial conditioning and natural to the human condition. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, wow, that actually is quite profound. And because those the last seven fetters are what sort of is the basis for continual rebirth. That sense, those obstructions of sense desire, aversion, and then particularly the next two of the desire to become, the desire to exist. Those fetters are essentially inherent to rebirth, to birth, to existence. They're part and parcel of it, and are very strong within the human birth as well. But then I had to think, well, artificial conditioning, what could that mean? And kind of going back to maybe a little bit of the etymology of the word artificial, thinking about it in terms of building artifices, constructions that are on top of everything else. In addition to the seven fetters that are sort of inherent to the human condition, as he described it, we add on top of that these three other obstructions, these three other fetters built on top of that basic structure for continual rebirth. In that we construct sort of this artifice of a belief in self, a very strong sense of me in relation to body and mind. We hold a whole set of practices and precepts and beliefs, the Sila Bhattapāramasa, clinging to these kinds of add-ons that are part of a whole conceptual creation of what we think we need to do to practice the path, as well as many other aspects of conventional reality. It's kind of there's this conventional reality that we've created that we believe in and strongly defend sometimes. And also the doubt, the skeptical doubt, that kind of add-on mental activity when we're not firmly established and not firmly well practiced. All of the conceptualization and abstraction and just proliferative thinking that we go through that manifests from this basic energy of unclarity, of non-stability, of doubt, unsureness. So these are artifices built on top of the basic structure of greed, hatred, and delusion. It all sounds pretty messy, but have heart. Because once we can really get a handle on these first three and come to some sense of clarity with determination, of course, then we're so much further along the path. And in fact, we're, in a sense, in the Buddha's teachings, kind of guaranteed that we're firmly established to the point where, it's a guarantee, in a sense, a spiritual guarantee that we'll finish our work at some point in time without falling back into, particularly falling into lower realms or, into back into doubt or confusion or belief in conventions and a strong belief in self. So it's worth really taking this to heart and developing that sense of commitment and sincerity to follow through this path. And it takes that. It's not for the faint of heart that we take on the fullness of this path and develop a full commitment to it. It's so easy, even as sincere practitioners who have attained sort of a modicum of sincerity or modicum of conviction in the practice. It's sometimes, and we gain benefits as we go along, and we see the freedom that comes from really acknowledging and seeing the difficulties, which we've been talking about the past several days, often just noticing and reflecting on how so much of our practice is the patient endurance to kind of get through these inevitable difficult mind states when we come on a retreat. Sometimes it happens that as we practice for many years and achieve some sort of sense of well-being coming from the practice, it can be, if the conditions, if we've got good conditions around us, it can be a little bit of a trap into complacency, and our efforts might kind of fade over time. I think all of us have probably had some experience with that who've been practicing for a while. You kind of go through these low periods where you just don't have energy or the inspiration has waned. Maybe pop back into it after a while, but how much effort are we putting in? Have we become complacent? And to not settle for, as Ruth said, not settle for just mere happiness. So it takes work, it takes continual effort, and to undo these very, very deep-set, strong tendencies, habits of mind, and to see them through to a complete liberation from them. A kind of a analogy that comes up for me these days is one around my physical body. I've been getting some help from a physical therapist, just going every now and then to see if I can ameliorate some chronic neck pain that I've had off and on, but kind of reared up again 7 or 8 months ago, and quite painful and obstructive in the practice. And basically been prescribed a graduated set of exercises to strengthen the weak muscles that are making my posture not so good and making some real sore areas, and strengthening the weak areas and then relaxing some of the tight areas. So a combination of both relaxation of that which is too tense and strengthening that which is weak on the opposite side. And some of these exercises, there is a gradual progression, but every time I get a new one, it's painful. It's hard. And I don't want to do it a lot of times. It's particularly the set that I just got a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week to 2 weeks ago. it's supposed to do 2 sets in the morning, 2 sets at night, and it involves lying flat on the floor, face down, and kind of lifting myself up from the chest and sticking my arms back and lifting them up and squeezing my shoulder blades together and holding that position for 20 seconds, repeating it 5 times, doing it sets of those kinds of things, and it's like I get up in the morning and I just don't want to do it. And the ones that he gave me before, which were using some kind of exercise bands, that you pull and squeeze and do all sorts of things with the back muscles with it, which I found just as grueling maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. It's interesting, though, how I've stuck with it. I've done it. And now I really look forward to those that are easy after I do the hard ones because it's, you finally realize the benefits of it, and those muscles are getting stronger. And hopefully the ones that I'm working on now will do the same, even though it doesn't seem like it. But I've made the commitment to do this. I really would like to see the end of that chronic neck pain, or at least an amelioration of it, and it is getting better, which is almost a miracle in my mind. But it actually works, but it only works because I just force myself to do it in some ways. I have that sense of like, okay, there's a motivation, and it's unpleasant, and it's hard, and it's difficult, and I don't want to do it, and I'd rather lie in bed for another half an hour. But no, that's not going to work. So yank yourself up and get down and just do it without thinking about it too much. And lo and behold, it does get a little bit easier, and the benefits start to appear. And the pain is less. It's not gone away, but it is less. So just as an illustration, same with the mental work that we have to do, the internal work with this practice. We can't let ourselves get complacent. And we can't give up halfway through too. I think either Ajahn Yanaka or Ajahn Sudhiro used the simile of trying to start a fire. That it takes a certain persistence and technique to actually get a fire started in just by using a sparker or a fire stick of some sort. And Ajahn Chah often talked about that, or there's a very good simile that he used of people who kind of enter half-heartedly into the practice and kind of do it for a little while and then give up because it's too hard, and so they stop, and they never have the momentum to keep going, which you have to do when you're trying to start a fire. You can't just, it's like a fire stick, you can't just keep on rubbing it and then taking a pause and drifting a little bit and then starting over again. You'll never start a fire that way. By the way, there's what I think is a great video from Abhayagiri, if you go to our website, our YouTube website, about it's actually, I ended up reading this during one retreat time. I think it's Ajahn Chah's treatise on starting a fire. And then there's a video that was done at a time when a group of monks were in Yosemite trying a fire stick and having finally some success with starting a fire with a fire stick. So I really encourage you to look at it. It's a great video, short little 5-minute clip. Keep at it. Yeah. It's a classic. An Abhayagiri classic. Anyway. But just to illustrate, that's you can't just, quit, start over again, quit, start over, and feel like you're going to actually gain any momentum and start the fire. You have to keep at it. And the inevitable results, if you do, will be that kind of sense of confidence, because you actually have stuck with it long enough to see some real results. We can eliminate our doubt, eliminate our unclarity by trying. And if we're failing in one area, we pick it up in a different way. But we don't stop until we start. We don't stop because we want to see some results, and then they will come with persistence. And at some point, we will have that confidence that's unshakable, and we will, even though we've got maybe a long ways to go in terms of eliminating all the greed, hatred, and delusion that's kind of at that natural conditioning of the human existence. We know that this is a path that works because we've seen at least some modicum of results from it, and that gives us the confidence to stick with it even more, and to realize that it's possible. It is possible, and then we know that for sure. The artifice, if you will, the artifice of Silabbata Paramasa, attachment to rules and conventions, in addition to the general way that we refer to it in regards to spiritual practice, meditation practice, using these conventions, rituals, if you will, like precepts, even the more devotional ones like chanting. Like a lot of people kind of get, oh my gosh, what is this chanting stuff all about? It's, it seems like it's kind of just, a blind ritual of some sort, bowing and offering, reverence to the Triple Gem, and these kinds of things, and it's not the real practice. It's just a ritual that we have to go through in this tradition, or a belief that we can purify the mind through certain external activities, as Ajahn Sudhira was talking about earlier this afternoon. But realizing that we're not picking them up with that kind of blind belief in mind that it's going to result in our liberation, but we use them as tools, skillful tools, to help create certain qualities of mind, help induce a sense of an open-heartedness, a relinquishment of self, and to learn the teachings. Sometimes the chanting and the rituals that we do actually have a very strong basis in the teachings. So we pick them up as tools, not as ends into themselves, but tools that we will use, and some we will continue using even when we start to realize the fruits of the path, because they're also inherently enjoyable when you let go of the kind of the antipathy towards them. So, but in addition to that, Ajahn Sumedho again, he kind of broadens his way of referencing Silabbata Paramasa, not just kind of rules and conventions, precepts and practices, but also kind of expanding it into a broader worldly description of our attachment to things like patriotism, country, culture, cultural identification, attaching to views about race, gender, even religion. Buddhism is the best. Those kinds of opinions that we can, views that we can develop that are socially and culturally taking a stance. Politics, of course, is a big one, and that they can become conventions that we attach to very strongly, and they're a fetter in that way. They're an obstruction to us in our quest for liberation. A few of us were recently having a discussion, came up in relation to the fact that this is the 60th anniversary of JFK's assassination, John F. Kennedy's assassination here. We're a couple of us in our 60s were remembering the time 1963 as kids when that happened, and the impact it had on all of us, even as children, watching our parents and friends, older friends, and their reactions, trying to remember what it was like. And I was remarking that, I remember my neighbors, next door neighbors, being completely blown away, devastated, just kind of almost incapacitated when it was happening. It was at least the impression of me at the age of 8 was the severity of that. And someone asked me, it's like, well, what about your parents? And I said, well, my parents were sort of quasi-Republicans, so they didn't really have quite as strong a reaction as my neighbors across, next door neighbors who were staunchly Democrat. And so I didn't feel the impact from my parents quite as much. And then this other person said that, yes, similar with her parents. Actually, one of her parents was a Republican and one was a Democrat. So we kind of got into remembering, too, that they're actually, and she said, and they actually stayed married and talked to each other. And started to just kind of reminiscent about a day when, a Republican and a Democrat could actually live together and speak to each other, and how polarized the world is these days, and how it's much more difficult to actually have sane conversations with somebody of a different political, social orientation. And it's kind of lamenting about the good old days not being here anymore. But just to recognize the strength of that kind of attachment that we, particularly, is quite evident in the world now, the attachment we have to our particular view or opinion or convention that we think is the most important or the best or the right one. And see what a trap that is. It's one of the reasons why monks are, at least in our tradition, are admonished not to get involved in politics. Try and keep neutral, be open to people of all different beliefs, opinions, not to go into that to that realm as best we can. Because it's an obstruction, it's a fetter to have such strong and polarizing views, beliefs, and is one that we just need to let go of if we want to see progress on the path, and kind of bleeds into the third, or actually the first in the list of the three fetters of Sakkaya Ditthi, identity view, and that we can identify so strongly with some of these more societal conventions, almost pulling them into the realm of personal identity, and that's where we start to really see the obstruction of this identity view, Sakkaya Ditthi, and the need to relinquish that if we want to become firmly established in the path. So that's a teaching that the Buddha spends a lot of time going into in his teachings, and We've hit upon it a little bit during this retreat, but just to really encourage to reflect on some of the teachings about how to disentangle oneself from this strong sense of me, mine, myself, I, me, and mine, that is really one of the fundamental perceptual distortions that keeps us bound up in the realm of suffering. The three characteristics, dukkha, anicca, anatta being the not-self contemplation, not a metaphysical statement, not a belief that we have to take on. There is no self, as we talked about, I think on first or second day of the retreat, but more of a contemplative strategy to let go of this overwhelming perception of me in relation to this body or this mind, and that if we can free ourselves from that sense of personal identification with the body and the mind, then that is the one of the major keys to being able to clearly work on the rest of the obstructions that we have. Because the obstructions can seem so overwhelming, the greed, the desire, the aversion, all the confusion, the anxiety, fear, states of mind are so much more daunting when they're wrapped up with a sense of self. And if we can start to untangle that personal involvement with these these other obstructive mind states, then, as painful as they are to let into our awareness and hold them with equanimity as best we can, as hard as that is and as painful as that can be, if we've eliminated or at least reduced that sense of ownership, that sense of this is who I am, these mental states, these drives, these obstructions, if we can eliminate that this is who I am, or these are mine, then there's so much more ability to have the strength to see them through. So, there's various ways that we have to just keep hammering on that self-effacement, that lessening of that sense of me in relation to this body. That either that I am this body, this is who I am, or that sense of, well, it's not who I am. I don't realize, I don't believe that, but it's mine, and I should have some control over it. So the sense of self comes in many different ways, whether it's a sense of identification with as who I am, or something that I have, that it's mine, that I have control over, or that I should have control over. Various combinations the Buddha goes into of all the various permutations of self-view, personality view. And we start to question that and ask ourselves, is it really true? Do I have ultimate control over this body? Can influence it a little bit, can feed it some good food and give it some rest and give it medicine, but in the end, it's going to go its own way. It has its life of its own, in a sense. It's it follows the laws of nature, and the laws of nature with a human body, as with everything, is it's born, it exists for a while, and then it passes away. It's subject to illness, aging, and there's really no one inside here who can make that any different than it is. So if we can really start to take that to heart and realize that not just as a depressing, I might as well do myself in kind of reflection, but as one that actually is liberating, because then we can step back from that entanglement with thinking that we should be able to control it when we really can't. Same with the mind, the other khandhas, the five aggregates, the body, the first one, and then the mind of the fourth, the second, third, fourth, and fifth khandhas of feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness. And one of the Buddha's teachings in regards to the five khandhas is really quite descriptive in terms of that insubstantiality, that lack of control and substantial nature of those that we take to believe in, to believe as who we are. Back to the body, the form, the Buddha describes it as a lump of foam, which from a distance looks quite solid and real, but when you get close upon it, you just see that it's just an illusion of, it's mostly air that is very fragile and dissipates very easily. Just in a brief puff of wind, it's gone. Feelings, the feelings of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, being like bubbles that arise in a puddle of water with rain coming down. Raindrops hit the puddle of water and a bubble pops up, or a bubble appears and then pops and goes away. And that the fleeting nature of pleasant and unpleasant, neutral feelings constantly changing. It's just like bubbles popping in a puddle of water. They move that quickly. They're that insubstantial. Perceptions, based on memory and how we classify our experience, how we categorize our experience, compartmentalize all of this experience that we have, being like a mirage in a desert, a person walking through a desert and thinking that there's an oasis, and then getting closer and all of a sudden it disappears. It's just a desert mirage. How much our perceptions shift and change, how one person that we think is just the most evil being in the world, based on some experience we've had with them, or some difficult interaction, and our perception of them is just this kind of devil, in a sense, out to get me. And then something changes, something happens, and it can be in 5 minutes that all of a sudden they do something kind and generous and quite lovely, either for you or somebody else. And you see this and you question, hold on a second, this person actually is really quite a lovely person, and has so many good qualities. Well, where did that other one go? Where did that beast go? Well, it's just a creation of mind, a perceptual aberration. So we do that over and over and over again. How often do friends become enemies? Enemies become friends. The pleasant turns into the unpleasant turns into the pleasant. This constant shifting, this nature of our perceptual realm. Just a mirage. The mental formations aggregate being like like a banana tree. We try and get to the core or the heart of what a thought or an emotion is, feeling them to be so substantial and so real, but it's like peeling away the bark, the core, trying to get to the core of the trunk of a banana tree or a plantain tree, as they used in the description of in the suttas. And you unravel layer after layer after layer of these thoughts and these emotions, trying to get to the substantial nature underneath it. And you get to the center, and there's no core. There's no substantial heartwood. in this formation. Nothing that you can pin your attention onto directly. And then the last aggregate of consciousness, I think as Ajahn Yanako referred to it being the magician's illusion, so that we have these experiences of sights and sounds and smells and tastes and tactile sensations, and again the intellect, the thoughts and the opinions and the plans, all of those things constantly, consciousness shifting from one of those sense bases to another over and over in such a rapid succession that it weaves this illusion of me in relation to you or the world around us. But it's only by a sleight of hand and moving quickly enough that we can't see it happen. So these allusions, these descriptions are very useful in seeing the insubstantiality of this sense of self. So we contemplate that over and over again. Are these feelings, are these perceptions really who I am? If they're so fleeting and constantly changing and hard to pin down, can we really say that that's who I am or that I have control over them? Our thought processes, sometimes weirdest thoughts just pop up into our heads. I mean, sometimes it's useful just to sit in a period of meditation and be very open and quiet to the silence, but then watch when a thought pops in, and sometimes they just make absolutely no sense whatsoever. And actually, most of the time, if you really look at it, they make absolutely no sense whatsoever. But it's sort of like, well, where did that come from? It's manifested from some past inclination or experience that just bubbled up out of seemingly nowhere. Did I ask that to come to my mind? No, I didn't. I didn't have any sense that this was coming. Who was in charge of that one? Not me. And then the consciousness, as I described, that overwhelming sense of me being part of a coherent world, but then watching that slow down, and when those moments of quiet and peace start to dissipate, and the illusion of continuity starts to come through, that sense of self gels very strongly around it. But really, it's an illusion. It's a trick. So to contemplate that over and over and over again, little bit by little bit, wearing away that sense of me in relation to my body, me in relation to my mental activities, until we're able to step back and see these as all conditioned processes arising and falling based on conditions that were set in motion from past actions, past intentions, all clouded with not seeing clearly, wanting to be fooled, in a sense. So once we start to get some insight on a deeper level of this uncontrollability, this independence, in a sense, of causes and conditions manifesting as body and mind, and step back with a quiet mind. This is what our meditation practice is setting the stage for, is to be able to separate our awareness a little bit from all of the objects of our awareness. So from earlier, that really impressionable story of Ajahn Chah meeting Ajahn Mun and him getting that kind of fundamental insight, the separation of the knowing quality from the objects that pass through our experience. So we don't fully let go of that until further down the line in the fetter of the conceit, I am, which is the more subtle flavor of the sense of self. But we can at least detach ourselves from the assumption, the belief that we are in any way, there is a me or a self related to any of the five aggregates, any of the five khandhas. We don't hold that as a working paradigm, even though we haven't fully detached ourselves from the scent of I am. We don't hold a belief in the sense, we don't hold a belief in an eternal self. So elimination of these first three fetters, this artificial conditioning, then gives us the opportunity to be able to delve into and work much more easily with those underlying conditions that keep us revolving around and around in the cycle of rebirth. We gradually whittle away at the aversion, the desire, the craving, and the confusion that we find ourselves often wrapped up in. But we can do it with a greater sense of ease and more of a sense of lightness, because we don't have to take it all so personally. So this is just that kind of encouragement, as Ruth so clearly said. Don't just settle for second best. Don't settle for a bit of relief. Enjoy that when it comes. Appreciate it when it comes. Realize that it is part and parcel of the path. And don't stop there. Just keep going. Don't hold back. So I'll just leave that for this evening's reflection.